Chapter 9. The Gala. The air backstage at the theater crackled. Not with the usual pre-performance energy, which was a familiar blend of focused adrenaline and quiet ritual, but with something else. Something tighter, brighter, more frantic. Gala night. It was a different beast altogether. The corridors, usually just thoroughfares between studio and stage, were crammed tonight. Dancers leaned against walls already lined with overflow costume racks, stretching hamstrings and ankles with intense concentration. Dressers wrestled with elaborate tutus, stiff with netting and sequins, their murmurs urgent, "Hold still, ribbon twisted." The atmosphere was a potent cocktail, hairspray thick enough to taste, clouds of setting powder mingling with the ever-present scent of sweat and rosin, all underscored by the low, vibrating hum of hundreds of nervous heartbeats. I found a relatively quiet pocket near the fire exit, leaning my forehead against the cool metal of the door, trying to draw a steadying breath. Even here, the chill of the night outside seemed to snake through the old building's bones. A draft whispered around the doorframe, raising goosebumps on my arms despite the layers I wore over my warm-up gear. Tonight wasn't just about dancing well. Tonight was about selling it. Reminding the city's elite, gathered out front in their jewels and silks, why the Veridian Ballet deserved their patronage, their hefty donations, their continued existence. The pressure felt different, less about achieving artistic transcendence for its own sake, more about showcasing a flawless, valuable product. And layered on top of that general pressure was the specific weight of Giselle. The excerpt we were presenting tonight included sections of Act 2, the wireless, ethereal and demanding, culminating in that terrifyingly exposed solo. Volkov's voice, from yesterday's final rehearsal, echoed sharp and critical in my memory. Laurent, more control on the descent, less human, more spirit, precision. Do not disappoint me. Disappointing Volkov was one thing. Disappointing the patrons who paid his salary, paid my inadequate salary, kept this whole fragile ecosystem afloat that felt like a heavier burden tonight. Focus, Elena. Breathe. Find your center. Precision. I closed my eyes, trying to visualize the steps, the music, the character, but my mind kept snagging on distractions. The thought of Abuela, hopefully warm and comfortable, unaware of the strange double life I led to ensure her debt was paid. The memory of our last clandestine meeting in Owen's damp basement, the hushed anxieties, the fragile solidarity. The image of Julian Stonewall's face, analytical, intriguing, complicated, surfacing unbidden from our recent conversation about point shoes. That ridiculously mundane topic that had somehow crackled with an unexpected undercurrent. I pushed the thought away. Tonight required absolute focus on Veridian, on Giselle, on projecting effortless perfection. Elena? A soft voice beside me. I opened my eyes to find Mei Chen holding out a steaming cup. "Chamomile and lavender," she murmured, her own face serene despite the surrounding chaos, her stage makeup immaculate. "Thought you might need this." "Mei, thank you." I smiled gratefully, accepting the warm cup. Her quiet presence was always a balm, an anchor of calm amidst any storm. We exchanged a brief look. A silent acknowledgement of the shared pressures, the secrets held just beneath the surface of nights like these. Tomi Ivanov bustled past, a whirlwind of nervous energy, already half into her glittering costume for the opening divertissement. Ribbon tore on my left shoe. "Again," she muttered, more to herself than anyone, her eyes darting around as if calculating the fastest route to Martha's emergency repair station. "Wish me luck," and she was gone. I saw Ashlyn across the crowded corridor, leaning against a wall, eyes closed, looking beautiful in her costume but utterly drained. She was carefully, almost imperceptibly, stretching her calf muscle. The toll of her schedule, balancing Veridian's demands with Nocturne's late nights, was etched onto her face. Our eyes met briefly, a flicker of shared understanding passing between us, the bone-deep exhaustion that no amount of stage makeup could fully conceal. Then Gwen appeared, weaving through the crowd with her usual sunny smile, offering quick words of encouragement to younger corps members. But as she caught my eye and gave me a quick, bright nod, I saw the tension coiled beneath the surface. the slight tightness around her eyes. This glittering high-stakes world of patrons and spotlights was a universe away from the damp basement where she'd bravely offered us refuge. Navigating this disparity, maintaining her perfect persona while holding onto her own financial reasons for seeking Nocturne's shadows, it was a heavy weight for someone so seemingly light. Nearby, Celeste stood perfectly still in a pool of relative quiet, hands clasped loosely, seemingly meditating amidst the frenzy, her focus entirely internal. In sharp contrast, Dylan paced like a caged panther in a small cleared space further down, radiating a contained, almost feral energy, impatient for the release of movement, clearly chafing against the pre-performance constraints. My gaze inadvertently snagged on Veronica Bellwether holding court near the main dressing room entrance. She was already in full Queen of the Willies costume, looking regal and imperious, laughing loudly at something one of the male principals said, but her eyes, sharp and assessing, constantly scanned the room, missing nothing. She thrived on this high-pressure atmosphere, fed on the competition, always looking for an angle. Our paths rarely crossed directly if I could help it. Her ambition felt like something sharp-edged, dangerous. I made a deliberate effort to turn slightly away, focusing back on my own preparation, pushing down the familiar unease she always seemed to inspire. 5 minutes to places for opening curtain. Dancers to the wings. The stage manager's voice crackled over the backstage intercom, instantly galvanizing the chaotic energy into focused movement. My heart gave a familiar lurch. Time to transition. Time to become the principal dancer. I took a final sip of maize tea, handing her back the cup with a grateful nod, and began the walk towards the stage right wing, where the Giselle Willis were assembling. The corridor narrowed, grew darker, the sounds changing from chatter and warm-ups to the hushed intensity of imminent performance, point shoes tapping softly on the worn floorboards, the rustle of tulle, whispered last-minute instructions from Madame Farrell. Through a gap between heavy velvet curtains, I caught a glimpse of the world out front. It was like looking into a different dimension. Chandeliers blazed, reflecting off polished surfaces and glittering jewels. A low, expectant murmur rose from hundreds of people packed into the ornate theater, women in elegant gowns, men in tuxedos, holding champagne flutes, their faces turned towards the stage. The sheer concentration of wealth and power was palpable, a tangible force. It was the engine that drove us, the audience we served, the patrons we needed to impress tonight more than ever. This is what keeps the lights on, I reminded myself, smoothing the tulle of my ghostly wily costume. This is what pays for Martha to struggle with inadequate shoe supplies. This pays our salaries. Salaries that force May to worry about medical bills, Tommy about coaching fees, me about Abuela. The bitter irony wasn't lost on me. We performed ethereal beauty, tragic sacrifice, otherworldly grace, all to keep this very earthbound, often brutal enterprise solvent. Smile, Elena. I instructed myself, taking my place in the wings, feeling the familiar pre-performance adrenaline begin its slow burn. Perform. Be perfect. Remind them why the art, why we, are worth supporting. The contrast between their effortless glamour and our hidden struggles felt like another heavy costume, one I had to wear seamlessly tonight. The curtain was about to rise. The moment the heavy velvet curtains swept open, the world dissolved into a controlled blaze of light and sound. The warmth from hundreds of stage lamps hit me like a physical wave, instantly prickling sweat beneath the tight bodice of my wily costume. Beyond the footlights, the audience was a vast, undulating darkness, faces blurred into indistinct ovals, but their collective gaze felt like a tangible weight, an expectant silence amplifying the first ethereal notes rising from the orchestra pit. Beside me, Henry Davis, my Albrecht for this excerpt, offered a brief, almost imperceptible nod, his own face set in intense concentration. It was time. No more backstage jitters. No more thoughts of finances or secrets. Only Giselle. Only the dance. We moved onto the stage, entering the spectral world of Act 2. The choreography was etched into my muscles, thousands of hours of repetition guiding my limbs. Yet tonight, under the pressure of the gala, each step felt hypercritical. I focused on my breathing, finding the rhythm beneath the music, striving for that impossible combination of unearthly lightness and absolute technical control. The berets across the stage needed to float, skimming the surface like mist, yet demand pinpoint precision from feet already aching from weeks of intense Giselle rehearsals. My point shoes tonight. They felt adequate, thankfully. Not perfect. Perhaps one of the slightly less resilient pairs Martha had lamented, but stable enough that I didn't have the added terror of anticipating a collapsing box or a failing shank. A small mercy. I extended into a long arabesque, holding the balance, feeling the familiar burn deep in my supporting leg, my gaze fixed somewhere in the infinite darkness beyond the stage. More spirit, less human, Volkov's voice echoed in my head. I tried to empty myself, to embody the sorrowful, vengeful ghost, letting the melancholic music flow through me. I caught a fleeting glimpse of Volkov himself in the wings, arms crossed, face impassive, his critical presence a familiar spur. Further back, Madame Farrell watched, with her usual hawk-like intensity. Somewhere out there, in one of the plush box seats, Armand was likely holding court, accepting praise for his brilliant company. And perhaps Julian Stonewall was out there too, his analytical gaze assessing not just the artistry, but the efficiency of movement, the return on investment. I pushed the thought away. Focus. Only the dance mattered now. Henry partnered me through the adagio section, his strength a familiar, reliable counterpoint to my own lines. We moved through the intricate lifts and balances, years of partnership allowing us to communicate non-verbally, anticipating each other's weight shifts. Breathing almost as one, the music swelled, demanding more. Higher extensions, faster turns, deeper emotion. I threw myself into the final, demanding diagonal of hops on point, my lungs burning, pushing through the fatigue towards the concluding pose, holding it for a beat in the sudden, stark silence before the lights plunged, leaving only the image of the spectral wireless imprinted on the audience's retinas. Applause erupted, a wave of sound washing over the stage. Distant yet enveloping, we held the pose, then sank into deep, synchronized reverences. The lights came up slightly, revealing the first few rows of applauding patrons. Familiar faces among them, board members, major donors, their expressions appreciative. We bowed again, then turned, exiting swiftly into the wings as the next group of dancers prepared for their divertissement. The moment I stepped off stage, the adrenaline began to recede, leaving behind a profound weariness and the familiar aches settling into my muscles. Backstage was already buzzing again, dancers preparing for the next piece, stagehands efficiently clearing props. I leaned against a cool section of the brick wall, catching my breath, the ghostly image of Giselle slowly fading, replaced by the more prosaic reality of Elena Laurent, principal dancer, duty done for now. But the night wasn't over. Mingling was expected, required. A quick change was in order. I navigated the crowded backstage corridors towards the principal dressing rooms, exchanging brief nods and tired smiles with colleagues. In the relative calm of the dressing room I shared with May and Ashlyn, I quickly peeled off the damp Wiley costume, toweling off the sheen of sweat, and slipped into the elegant, company-approved deep sapphire cocktail dress laid out for me. I quickly removed my over-the-top stage makeup and replaced it with a fresh application of a smoky eye and a berry lip. Next, I loosened the severe Wiley hairstyle into something softer, and the transformation was complete. Elena Laurent, gracious representative of the Veridian Ballet, ready for her close-up with the patrons. I took a deep breath, plastered on a smile that felt both practiced and brittle, and headed out towards the glittering reception in the theater's grand lobby. The transition was always jarring. From the focused intensity and familiar smells of backstage, to the wall of sound and scent that hit you upon entering the main lobby. Loud chatter competing with a live jazz band, the clinking of glasses, waves of expensive perfume, the visual overload of designer gowns, tailored tuxedos, and flashing jewelry under the massive crystal chandeliers. Waiters circulated with trays of champagne and elaborate hors d'oeuvre. It felt like stepping onto an entirely different kind of stage, one requiring a different, perhaps more exhausting type of performance. I took a flute of champagne from a passing tray, mostly as a prop, and began to navigate the clusters of guests. Immediately, I was intercepted by Mrs. Albright, a prominent board member whose smile never quite reached her eyes. "Elena, darling. Magnificent. Truly magnificent. You're Giselle. Such pathos." I thanked her, murmuring something about the beauty of the choreography, accepting her air kiss that landed somewhere near my ear. Then, Mr. Davison, a banking executive whose corporate sponsorship was vital, wanted to know how rehearsals were progressing for the full Giselle premiere. I assured him they were challenging but rewarding, keeping my answers brief, polite, professional. It was a dance of a different sort, deflecting overly personal questions, expressing gratitude for support, embodying the grace and poise expected of a principal dancer even off stage. I felt like a prized exhibit, admired and appraised, slightly removed from the genuine warmth I sometimes felt from regular audience members. My gaze drifted towards the silent auction tables lining one side of the lobby, laden with donated luxuries, vacation packages, designer handbags, cases of fine wine. And there, prominently displayed on velvet cushions under focused spotlights, were the pointe shoes, several pairs, cleaned and polished to an unnatural sheen, each accompanied by a small, elegant card bearing the principal dancer's name and signature. I recognized one pair instantly, the slight discoloration on the satin near the heel, the way the box had molded. They were mine, retired only a few weeks ago, after finally succumbing during a particularly brutal rehearsal. Seeing them presented like this, as objects of value, felt incredibly strange, almost intimate, yet utterly public. Nearby, standing slightly apart from the main throng, I saw Julian Stonewall. He was deep in conversation with Alexander Devereaux. Alex, the young, keenly interested board member Tommy, had spotted near Nocturne. Julian looked entirely at ease in this environment, his tailored tuxedo impeccable, holding his champagne flute with casual elegance. But his expression, as he gestured towards the pointe shoe display while talking to Alex, was sharply focused, analytical. He wasn't just mingling, he was observing, assessing. Alex listened intently, nodding occasionally. Later, weaving through the crowd, I overheard snippets of conversation. Stonewall's shoe auction idea was brilliant. Raised nearly double the estimate. Such a clever way to engage donors. So his initiative had been a resounding success for the company coffers. A part of me felt a genuine flicker of relief. Every dollar counted. But another part, the part that remembered Martha's weary face and my own worn-out shoes, felt a persistent prickle of unease. Was his interest truly satisfied now that the fundraising goal was met? Or was this just phase one of a deeper scrutiny? The gala swirled around me. The murmur of conversations, the clink of ice and glasses, the smooth sounds of the jazz trio playing in the corner. Armand Dufour held court near the grand staircase, accepting compliments, his laughter booming. I saw him gesture towards Julian at one point, likely praising his innovative contributions as I'd heard rumored. I exchanged brief pleasantries with other dancers, Henry Davis looking dashing but slightly strained, Talia offering a warm but tired smile. The whole event felt like a beautifully constructed facade, glittering and impressive, designed to project success and artistic vibrancy. But beneath the surface, I felt the echoes of our basement meeting, the hushed anxieties, the financial pressures, the resourcefulness born of necessity. This opulent celebration felt worlds away from that cold, damp reality, built on foundations that felt increasingly precarious the more I learned. I watched Julian move through the crowd, interacting easily with powerful board members, discussing finances with the gala chair, his competence undeniable. Yet he retained that air of watchful distance I'd noticed before. Was he performing too? Or was he simply seeing through the glittering surface, analyzing the structures beneath, just as I was, albeit from a vastly different perspective? The thought was unsettling, adding another layer of complexity to the man who represented both the potential salvation and the potential exposure of everything we were trying to hold together. The relentless glitter and noise of the gala began to feel abrasive, scraping against nerves already raw from the performance and the underlying tension of my double life. The forced smiles felt glued on, the polite laughter echoing hollowly in my ears. Compliments on my Giselle, however well-intentioned, started to blur into a meaningless drone. The champagne tasted metallic. The elaborate canapés turned to ash on my tongue. Exhaustion, deep and profound, settled into my bones, making the prospect of maintaining this facade for another hour feel like scaling a mountain. I needed air. I needed silence. I needed to escape, just for a moment, from the suffocating weight of expectation and performance, both on stage and off. Murmuring an excuse about needing water to a patron whose name I couldn't recall, I slipped away from the main throng in the grand lobby. I bypassed the crowded bar area and headed towards a quieter wing of the theater, one that housed administrative offices and led, I remembered, to a small, rarely used upper balcony overlooking the side street. The transition was immediate and deeply welcome. The roar of the crowd softened to a muted thrum behind me. The overly bright chandeliers gave way to softer, dimmer sconce lighting in the corridor. The air felt cooler here, still carrying the faint scent of beeswax polish from the wooden floors and old paper from the nearby archives room. Relief washed over me, the anonymity of the quiet hallway a sudden, blessed balm. I pushed open the heavy door leading onto the small stone balcony. The cold hit me instantly, sharp and clean, cutting through the residual heat of the performance and the stuffiness of the gala. I stepped out, pulling the thin silk wrap I wore over my dress tighter around my shoulders. Below, the street was quiet, dusted with a fresh layer of snow that gleamed under the ornate street lamps, muffling the city sounds. Fat snowflakes were still drifting down, lazy and silent against the dark sky. I leaned against the cold stone balustrade, breathing in the frigid air, letting the quiet and the cold seep into me, trying to find my center again. Needed a breather? The voice, low and unexpected, startled me. I spun around. Julian Stonewall stood near the doorway, leaning against the frame, watching me. He must have sought refuge here too. He held a half-empty champagne flute, looking entirely composed in his impeccable tuxedo, yet there was something in his posture, a slight loosening of the shoulders, perhaps, that suggested he, too, felt the need to escape the main event. Surprise kept me silent for a beat, my heart giving an unwelcome lurch. "Mr. Stonewall," I managed, recovering my professional composure, though it felt flimsy out here in the cold intimacy of the small balcony. "Julian, please," he corrected quietly, stepping further out onto the balcony, letting the door click softly shut behind him. The muted sounds of the gala dimmed further, leaving us in a pocket of relative silence, broken only by the whisper of the falling snow. He stopped a few feet away, looking out at the snowy street. "It's intense in there." "Intense," I agreed simply, turning back to grip the cold stone railing. An awkward silence stretched between us, filled only by the night air and the unspoken awareness that had sparked in the studio corridor days ago. He broke it first. "Your performance tonight, the Giselle excerpt, it was truly extraordinary, Ms. Laurent." He paused, then added, his voice losing some of its formal edge. "I mean it. Beyond the technical brilliance, there was something else. Haunting." His sincerity caught me off guard. Patrons offered effusive compliments. Julian's felt different, observant, specific. "Thank you," I murmured, feeling a warmth spread through me that had nothing to do with the champagne I hadn't drunk. "It's a demanding role, emotionally as much as physically." "I can only imagine," he said, moving slightly closer, leaning against the railing beside me now, though leaving a respectful distance. "Especially balancing preparations for the full premiere with events like this." He gestured vaguely back towards the muffled sounds of the party. "It's part of the job," I said, perhaps a little too quickly, falling back on practiced phrases. "Is it?" he asked, his gaze searching mine in the dim light filtering from inside. "Or does the performative aspect," he chose the word carefully, "sometimes feel draining?" His perception was unnerving. He saw more than I expected him to. I hesitated, then found myself admitting, "Sometimes. Tonight, especially." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding, watching it plume white in the freezing air. "It feels very far removed from the work we do in the studio." "I understand that feeling," he said unexpectedly. "The disconnect between the internal mechanics, whether it's finance or choreography, and the external presentation required." He took a sip of his champagne, his eyes still on me. "How are the Giselle preparations overall? Beyond formidable?" His genuine curiosity chipped away further at my reserve. I found myself talking, really talking, for the first time about the role, not just the steps but the character's descent, The challenge of portraying that fragile balance between innocence and madness, love and betrayal, life and spectral vengeance. I spoke of the physical toll, yes, but also the psychological weight, the way the character could seep into your thoughts, your dreams. He listened intently, his gaze never leaving my face, asking quiet, insightful questions that showed he was actually hearing me, not just waiting for his turn to speak. As I talked, I became intensely aware of him, the sharp lines of his tailored suit contrasting with the soft fall of snow behind him, the intelligence and unexpected warmth in his eyes, the way the cold air didn't seem to faze his composure. I felt the subtle shift as the conversation moved from professional courtesy towards something undeniably personal. We were no longer just foundation liaison and principal dancer. We were two people seeking refuge on a cold balcony, sharing a moment of unexpected honesty. I shivered then, a sudden tremor that wasn't entirely from the February cold. His gaze sharpened with concern. "You're freezing," he stated, his voice roughening slightly. Before I could protest, he made a subtle move closer, angling his body slightly as if to shield me from the windward side, decreasing the space between us until I could feel the faint warmth radiating from him, smell the clean, expensive scent of his cologne, mingling with the crisp night air, and the lingering aroma of champagne on his breath. My breath caught. The air crackled. Every nerve ending suddenly felt hypersensitive. I could hear the soft hiss of the falling snow, the distant thrum of the party inside, the surprisingly loud beat of my own heart. His hand, ungloved, brushed against my arm as he shifted, a fleeting touch that sent an electric jolt straight through me. "This is reckless," a voice screamed inside my head. "He's Stonewall. He's bored. He's sharp, analytical. He's probably still dissecting the shoe budget even now. He represents power, scrutiny, everything that threatens our secret." But another part of me, the part starved for genuine connection, for a moment of warmth that wasn't stage lighting, leaned into the proximity. "He sees me," it whispered back. "He listens. This feeling, it's real, not calculated, not performed." The urge to close the remaining distance, to feel something uncomplicated and true, however dangerous, was overwhelming. His eyes held mine, dark and intense in the dim light. I saw the same conflict mirrored there, awareness of the impropriety, the risk, warring with the undeniable pull between us. The analytical CFO seemed momentarily eclipsed by the man. He lifted a hand, hesitating for a fraction of a second before gently touching a stray strand of hair that had escaped my loosened bun, tucking it behind my ear. His fingers brushed my skin, warm against the cold, and I couldn't suppress another shiver. His gaze dropped to my lips, my heart hammered against my ribs. The world narrowed to this small, cold space, to the snowflakes landing softly on his dark shoulders, to the charged silence between us. He leaned in slowly, giving me every chance to pull away, to break the spell. I didn't. Just as his lips were about to meet mine, a loud burst of laughter echoed from the corridor behind us, followed by the sound of the balcony door being pushed open. We sprang apart instantly, guilt and panic flooding through me, replacing the intoxicating warmth of moments before. My face felt flushed, my breathing ragged. Julian stepped back quickly, turning towards the railing, his expression abruptly shuttered, professional mask snapping back into place, though I saw the muscle ticking in his jaw. Two laughing patrons stumbled out onto the balcony, oblivious, seeking fresh air. "Oh, so sorry. Didn't realize anyone was out here," one exclaimed loudly, peering at us through the dimness. "Just admiring the snow," Julian replied smoothly, his voice perfectly even, betraying nothing of the moment that had just passed. He turned back towards me, his eyes meeting mine for a split second, a look conveying shock, regret, and a clear, sharp warning. This didn't happen. I should get back," I stammered, pulling my wrap tighter, desperate to escape the sudden awkwardness, the near exposure. "Yes," he agreed curtly, his gaze already moving past me towards the door. "Enjoy the rest of the gala, Ms. Laurent." The formality was back, thicker than before. Without another word, I turned and fled, slipping past the patrons, back into the brightly lit corridor, my heart pounding like a drum against my ribs. I didn't look back. The warmth of the theater felt suffocating now, the noise abrasive. What had just happened? What had almost happened? The dangerous, exhilarating, confusing intimacy of that stolen moment vibrated through me, leaving me breathless and terrified. We shouldn't have. The risk was insane. Yet, the memory of his closeness, the intensity in his eyes, the feeling of being truly seen, it lingered, a treacherous counterpoint to the cold reality I had to return to. Re-entering the grand lobby felt like plunging back into an overly bright, overly loud dream. My skin prickled, hyper-aware, my heart still beating a frantic rhythm against my ribs from the encounter on the balcony. The ambient noise, the chatter, the clinking glasses, the smooth jazz trio, seemed amplified, almost abrasive. I automatically retrieved the practiced smile, nodding vaguely at passing faces, murmuring polite responses I couldn't recall seconds later. My mind was miles away, caught in the echo of that intense, suspended moment, the ghost of Julian's proximity, the terrifying, exhilarating spark that had ignited between us in the winter chill. I tried to blend back in, tried to focus on the waning energy of the gala, but everything felt filtered through a new, distorting lens. I felt hyper-aware of Julian across the room. Though I consciously avoided looking directly at him, my gaze seemed drawn magnetically in his direction. Once, twice, our eyes met over the heads of the crowd. The first time, his expression was unreadable, quickly masked, but the brief flicker acknowledged the shared shock. The line crossed. The second time, later, as the crowd began to thin, there was something else. A deeper intensity. A question, perhaps, quickly veiled again by professional distance. Each loaded glance sent a fresh jolt through my system, confirming the reality of what had happened, the reality of the dangerous current now flowing between us. Confusion reigned supreme in my thoughts. What was that? What did it mean? The attraction, simmering beneath the surface for weeks during our brief, professional interactions, had flared into something undeniable on that cold balcony. It was real, potent. But the complications, they were terrifying. Julian Stonewall, CFO of Stonewall Development, son of the president and CEO, heir to an empire, member of our board, Stonewall Foundation liaison. He represented the very structure, the power, the financial scrutiny that felt increasingly threatening to the fragile secrecy of Nocturne, to the survival of the 12 of us balancing on this precarious edge. How could I reconcile the man whose touch had felt so electric, whose gaze had seemed to see beyond my carefully constructed facade, with the analytical CFO potentially investigating the very financial discrepancies that kept us dancing in the shadows? My thoughts flashed to Nocturne, the pulsing darkness, the anonymity, the raw physical release of moving without judgment, without the weight of expectation. It was a different kind of escape, uncomplicatedly physical, deliberately detached. What I'd just experienced with Julian felt infinitely more complex, more dangerous, touching a part of me I kept rigidly guarded. Which world was safer? The smoky ambiguity of Nocturne, or the potentially devastating intimacy sparked with a man who held so much power over our legitimate lives? The question offered no easy answers, only a deepening sense of unease. Slowly, inevitably, the gala began to wind down. The jazz trio played a final, languid set. Waiters circulated with diminishing trays. Patrons began retrieving expensive coats from the check room, their voices softer now, tinged with fatigue beneath the lingering conviviality. Final, effusive compliments were offered, promises of continued support made. The air, once buzzing with forced excitement, grew heavier, quieter. The massive chandeliers seemed to dim slightly. Or perhaps it was just my perception as the energy seeped out of the room. Staff moved discreetly, beginning the quiet work of clearing glasses and dismantling decorations. I saw my fellow dancers gathering their belongings from the dressing rooms, shedding the temporary glamour of the gala for the practicality of street clothes. Tired sighs replaced performance smiles. Quiet congratulations on surviving another high-stakes company event were exchanged. Ashlyn leaned heavily against May, clearly exhausted but relieved. Tommy was already mentally calculating how soon she could get home. Gwen offered me a small, weary smile that held a hint of shared relief. We'd made it through without incident. The collective exhale was almost audible. Finally, it was time to leave. Bundled back into my heavy winter coat, scarf wrapped high, the theater felt vast and echoing around me as I walked towards the main exit. The triumphant fundraising results, Julian's successful signed shoe initiative, it all felt distant now, overshadowed by the intense, personal drama of the night. Relief that the demanding event was over warred with a profound uncertainty about what came next. The encounter with Julian hadn't simplified anything. It had thrown a dangerously captivating variable into an already overloaded equation. The relentless pressure of Giselle, the exhausting demands of Nocturne, the quiet responsibility for my sisters, the deep, unwavering commitment to Abuela, and now, this. This undeniable, terrifying connection with Julian Stonewall. Pushing through the heavy glass doors, I stepped out into the night. The cold air hit my flushed face, sharp and clean. It had stopped snowing, but a fresh, sparkling blanket covered the street and sidewalks, muffling the city sounds, reflecting the streetlights with a pristine, almost magical beauty. The city felt quiet, asleep, holding its breath beneath the snow. I paused for a moment on the theater steps, watching the last few patrons drive away in sleek, dark cars. The weight of the night, of all my secrets, settled onto my shoulders. I pulled my scarf tighter, breathing out a visible plume of white vapor into the freezing air. The echo of that stolen moment on the balcony, the feeling of Julian's hand brushing my arm, the intensity in his eyes, it lingered, a confusing warmth against the winter chill. It felt less like a promise and more like a premonition, a shiver of apprehension tracing its path down my spine. Turning towards home, I started walking, carrying the weight of it all through the silent, snow-dusted city.